A closer look at the top political headlines this week, and joining us are ABC political director, deputy political director Averi Harper, and contributing political correspondent Rachael Bade. Welcome to you both. Good morning. Good morning. All right, so Averi, we are talking about George Santos again, but for a different reason. We're talking about his congressional seat because a moderate Democrat beat a Republican. So what does this mean for, Democrats nationwide?
Right. It means that it could change how some Democrats won, particularly in some suburban swing districts. So Tom Suozzi was a Democrat who won in that race, and he campaigned as a moderate on the issue of immigration, really important to the voters in that district. He talked about strengthening border security. He talked about finding a bipartisan solution to immigration policy, and that bode well for him. So there are folks who are taking notes on his win, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the special dynamics that were at play in this race. This was a Republican Party that was reeling from the scandal of George Santos. Also, Tom Suozzi's not your average candidate. He is somebody who held that seat for 3 terms before Santos, and he had a long political career in that area before that. So he was a known quantity to the voters in that area. So because of that, I think there are going to be some limitations in terms of how much that can be replicated elsewhere.
And it's interesting because looking at the broader implications of this in Congress, I think it was Speaker Johnson who said that Suozzi sounded like a Republican, but for Republicans, a narrow margin, now even more narrow, Rachael.
Yeah, obviously unwelcome news for Speaker Mike Johnson, who, by the way, warned his Republican members not to vote with Democrats to oust George Santos for this very reason. I mean, right now, even before this special election, the House majority is so narrow that Speaker Mike Johnson and Republicans are having a really hard time passing anything. I mean, just this week they had to delay consideration of this really important surveillance bill because they didn't have the Republican votes because they were too divided. Johnson has lost something like half a dozen votes on the floor. This is unheard of. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in all of her time in leadership, never lost a single vote on the House floor. So this is going to make his job even harder in terms of getting the votes for passage. And I'll also note that this comes at a time when a lot of Republicans are having buyer's remorse about Johnson and voting for him for Speaker. I have talked to a lot of Republicans on the Hill. They won't necessarily admit it publicly, but privately they say, look, he's indecisive. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's sort of flip-flopping on everything. And it's really going to raise, the prospect of people asking questions. How long can this guy be Speaker?
We've seen this perpetual gridlock that just continues to be in place there, even on bipartisan legislation and proposals. Averi, though, let's turn now to the Republican primary, because 1 week from today, we've got the primary in South Carolina. Nikki Haley still far behind Donald Trump in the polls. But what is her strategy at this point in staying in the race?
Right. It's going to be tough for her. She is trailing behind former President Trump by 30 points in South Carolina, according to 538. And I think it's really interesting how she's sort of shifted her messaging on this. Earlier in the year, she said she was strong in Iowa. She was going to be stronger in New Hampshire and even stronger in her home state. She is not saying that anymore. She is saying that she's just going to be competitive in her home state, which I think is some tempering of expectations there. So she is doing some travel, crisscrossing the state of South Carolina. She is talking to voters there. But I think her team is really focusing forward to Super Tuesday. And that's why we've seen her go and fundraise, hold events in delegate-rich states, places like Texas and California. But it remains a big question if she's going to be able to maintain the confidence of supporters to propel her campaign forward.
All right. And Rachael, let's turn to NATO right now, because we saw Donald Trump say that if NATO countries don't pay those defense funds or enough of those defense funds, that he would encourage Russia to do whatever it wants. How's that playing on Capitol Hill?
Not exactly well, as you can imagine. Democrats obviously outraged here. And while a lot of Republicans were saying, look, this is just Trump being Trump, he doesn't really mean it. He was just trying to make a point about U.S. funding for NATO. Privately, a lot of Republicans did have concerns about what he said. I do think the most interesting thing here is actually the timing. Trump's comments about, Russia invading NATO potentially, or invading a country who is part of NATO. It comes just a couple of days before we get this news that, Russia's trying to put nuclear weapons in outer space. The Putin critic, Alexei Navalny, was killed while he was in prison, most likely murdered. And this is going to really force Congress to address the issue of how is it best for the United States to counter Russia. Right now, there's a bill that has been sort of on hold in Congress for the past 4 months to fund Ukraine, which is obviously on the front lines trying to defeat Russia's invasion. It's gone through the Senate, but the House, even though there's probably more than 300 votes, it could easily pass if they put it on the floor. Speaker Mike Johnson has been getting pressure from the MAGA wing, from Donald Trump, not to put that bill on the floor. And so I think with all of the sort of confluence of these Russia headlines, it's going to be interesting to watch to see if this actually if the pressure builds on Johnson enough to actually move on something with Ukraine and assistance.
So much in flux and so much at stake. Rachel, thank you so much. We
Also,
appreciate Avery
real
Harper.
quick, personally, congratulations to Avery and her husband. They announced they are expecting
It's
their
official.
child.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Thank you.
Love having you here to talk politics, but celebrating personally.
Growing our Good Morning America family, too. That's great.
Another ray of sunshine.
Yes, yes. Congratulations, Avery.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.